Today on Upfront, Wisconsin's on-again, off-again voter ID law is on again, but there's a new lawsuit over ballot design. What will it take to implement the law at the local level, and what's going on with absentee ballots? I'll be asking Milwaukee Election Director Neil Albrecht next on Upfront. Then the Potawatomi tribe withholding millions of dollars in gaming payments from the state. Is the tribe worried a competing casino will be approved? My guest is Forest County Potawatomi Attorney General Jeff Crawford.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Upfront. Will we be ready? That's the question for voters and elections officials as the November 4th election draws near. The state's controversial voter ID law, the subject of years' worth of litigation, is back in effect for November. A three-judge panel of the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals reinstated the law 10 days ago. But last week, the American Civil Liberties Union asked the full court to weigh in. And now the state's top Republican lawmakers are suing the Government Accountability Board over the look of a redesigned ballot. All this is happening as election officials scramble to implement voter ID at the local level, especially as it pertains to thousands of absentee ballots. We're talking now with one of those elections officials, Milwaukee Election Commission Executive Director Neil Albrecht. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks. What have you learned in the last week that assures you that this election will go fairly smoothly?
Well, I think we've all, as clerks across the state of Wisconsin, we've all received much needed guidance from the Government Accountability Board in terms of how this law applies to polling place procedures, to our absentee ballot voters, and to the public. We lost about 3 days waiting for just some direction in terms of how we can apply this law to our absentee voters, which needed to provide the photo ID, which did not.
So you have sent out now, by law, you were required to send out absentee ballots. Has that happened in the last week?
We are sending them out now. There was a statutory deadline in terms of when absentee ballots need to be mailed for all requests on file. The populations that are exempt from the voter ID requirement, those being people who indicate or certify that they are indefinitely confined to their homes, that's a lot of seniors, military voters, overseas voters, are all exempt from the photo ID requirement. So we're able to get those ballots out. While we're sending those out, we're also generating a mailing to all the absentee voters who will need to provide their photo IDs. We've got some great collaborations in the city of Milwaukee. We've made it so that they can walk into any neighborhood-based Milwaukee Public Library, any housing authority development, and they can receive a photocopy of their ID, and those entities will transmit those IDs to the Election Commission.
How many ballots are we talking about, absentee ballots, for the city of Milwaukee?
Roughly, well, right now we have about 8,000 requests for absentee ballots. Of that, about 1,000 fall within the needing the photo ID requirement before their ballots can be released.
Let's broaden this discussion and talk about voter ID in general in November. Are you confident that you'll be able to communicate with the public so that, for example, people who don't vote as often know that they have to have a photo ID when they come to the polls? Are you anticipating problems because of a lack of public knowledge?
I think there's already strong public awareness of the voter ID law with, I would go so far as to say, a majority of people. Ironically, the individuals who are most likely to not have a photo ID available on Election Day are the individuals who will probably not receive the message prior to the election or who may not receive it. And those would be people in poverty who tend to be very transient, challenged by day-to-day living. The message may not reach them, or they may not have the opportunity to secure the ID to be able to vote. I would add to that students who are, of course, very focused on their academics and the start of the school semester at this time of year, and then our seniors. Those are the populations that I would be worried about.
The last time we did this was back in February of 2012, and that's a very low turnout election. So was there anything to be learned about how voter ID worked then, or are these completely different situations?
They're really completely different situations. In February of 2012, we had an election in the city of Milwaukee with less than a 10% voter turnout. There was also 7 months leading up to that election for public dissemination of voter ID related information. And the state and all the municipalities were coordinated in terms of making sure the public was aware of the new voter ID requirement. Now we're talking 7 weeks.
Can you do it in 7 weeks?
I don't think we can do it as effectively as we should in 7 weeks, and that's really our concern. I think I can understand and appreciate the value of voter ID in terms of a perception that it could reduce fraud, which is already very minimal in elections. And I often hear, well, one person committing fraud in an election is one person too many. I would say, though, that if we lose one person being able to submit a ballot in this election, that is one person too many. And so there really is a question in terms of what I can be confident about is that we will have voters show up at polling places on Election Day. They will not have the ID necessary to be able to vote, and that we will end up turning voters away, no matter how much we try to get that message out.
Some people have said there's a possibility of chaos. Is that too strong a word?
I wouldn't say chaos. Again, looking back on that February 2012 election, our election workers had all the time in the world in an election that had a less than 10% turnout to work with the public and maybe explain to them further the ID requirement and even direct them in terms of how to secure an ID. That's not going to be possible this November when we project over an 80% voter turnout. So it will slow down operations at a voting site. It will lead to longer lines. It could certainly cause a greater level of public confusion and even frustration, but I would say it will not be chaos.
Neil Albrecht oversees the elections process here in the city of Milwaukee. Thanks very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. Later on up front, the Democratic State Senate candidate trying to make up for lost time. But first, our opponents of the Kenosha Casino getting concerned that the project will be approved. I'll ask a leader of the Forest County Potawatomi when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by American Transmission Company.